Lawyers of Reddit, what was your I am defiantly winning this one moment? I had a client who had a pretty severe slip and fall in a pharmacy. In my state, we are not allowed to see surveillance of the subject until after the deposition or other similar testimony is taken. The rule is in place to protect defendants, so we don't coach the client based on what we see in the video. Anyway, we take the deposition, then they send the video. Not 30 minutes later, I get a call from opposing counsel wanting to settle. The video revealed that my client had fallen, passed out and peed herself. She was very elderly and very hurt. The manager of the store had an employee put signs out showing wet floor and mop up around the lady, all while she was unconscious, all before calling 911. Settled that one for the policy limits right there. I was defending a company being sued for kicking a customer out for being drunk. He showed up to trial, small claims, wasted at 10 a.m. The judges in small claims are lenient on process. They like to adjudicate on the merits. So we started. He's the plaintiff, so he goes first. Can barely stand during his opening statement. Knocks over his shopping bag full of evidence. Just awful. The court put a stop to it and ruled in my client's favor. The only words I spoke were putting my name on the record. This is peak small claims court and I love it. Beats my second favorite small claims case where the person suing her sister for stealing her ruby bracelet showed up wearing the bracelet. The shopping bag of evidence was what puts you up to number one. I'd love to have known what his bag full of evidence actually was. Airplane bottles of vodka. He was going to demonstrate how much he could drink without getting drunk. Not a lawyer, of course, but I lived in a house with a slumlord property manager. Everything looked okay when we moved in, but we noticed a leaking spot in the ceiling. They just came and painted over it. Multiple times. We learned after the fact that half the house didn't even get air conditioning and had no air circulation. With windows nailed shut. After a year, my daughter developed asthma. My son had chronic sinus infections. And my husband and I had headaches and were sick every month. We also began to have issues with bugs no matter what we tried. I sent the kids off to their dads and my husband and I pulled our ship apart. We found mold on everything. Nothing in a visible place because I clean a lot. But once we pulled back furniture, band mattresses, it was everywhere. I took pictures and had excellent documentation of our landlords. Less than stellar attention. We broke our lease and moved out with their approval. Versus having them put us in a hotel. We threw away so much shit. All of which was documented. They tried to hit me with a $3,000 bill saying we ripped doors out. Doors I had pictures of being full of mold inside. I had about 100 pictures and about 30 pages of documents. They tried to say we trashed the place. My lawyer sent theirs just a few images and emailed transcripts and I had my deposit back a week later. My lawyer said the only reason he took my case was because of all of the documentation I provided. God. This is going to read like it belongs in art that happened. My dad saw the video, which was famous at his firm. Workers' comp claim for a back injury that seems suspicious, so they sick a pie on the guy after a while. Which is fairly common. Pie comes back with a video of the guy batting softball batting practice. Torquing his back over and over. Exactly what he says he can't do. Okay, whatever. People get caught all the time. The camera pans and who is shagging balls in the outfield? Opposing ducking counsel. So, yeah. Case dropped and the judge took it up with the bar. Sue. In my country, shagging means to have sexual relations with. Please clarify if opposing counsel was doing the deed with balls in a softball field. Thanks. Not a lawyer. I represented myself in a restraining order hearing. And I was terrified. I was the petitioner and I was in the same room as my abuser for the first time since I'd obtained the emergency order. I felt a lot better as soon as my abuser's lawyer butchered my name. And even better when the judge kept telling him off. Best moment, though, was when he declined to cross-examine my third witness because my other two had destroyed the points he was trying to make. I'm a lawyer, and it's been my experience that judges tend to give pro se folks, that is, people representing themselves in court, more leeway in court than they would to a trained attorney. And, because most judges are human beings, I have to imagine that the judge wasn't in a hurry to give your abuser the benefit of the doubt. Congratulations on the, I assume, win. And I hope you're doing better now. Thank you. It was a win. And yeah, the judge's face went pretty stony and the bailiff stood up very straight when I got to some of the harder parts of my testimony. There's charges pending at the prosecutor's office right now and I get to renew my order in a couple months. So we'll do it all over again if he contests. I think I have enough to prove he's a continuing danger. When the judge keeps on questioning the other side repeatedly, without me needing to say or submit anything, definitely have a lot of those moments. Especially when you have a tight case. Or when the other side's arguments are too flimsy. Truck driver changed his story on the stand about how the accident happened from what he had always said previously. Next on the stand, the police officer who had responded to the scene gives this new version too. I ask him on cross when he heard this new version. And he said, "In the hallway just before I came in. Oh, I'm definitely winning this one." Wait, so the cop lied too, or was he pointing out the truck driver's lie? The cop had only ever talked to the truck driver because my client was too injured to talk, so he had parroted the trucker's story in his report and found my client at fault. So I think he initially was trying to back up the truck driver since it was kind of egg on his face if the driver had been lying. But at least he was honest enough to admit that the driver had very recently amended his version of the story. I was representing a rental company for homes. Had to present a case where I had to prove the tenants had been using the house they had rented for an illegal weed farm. They claimed they did have weed in the house, but only for their own recreational use. Apparently there's such a thing as a weed expert, and I asked him to testify about how much weed is considered normal for a joint. How many joints per day a regular user would smoke, etc. Little weed facts, so to speak. With his written testimony I did the math, which I presented during my end statement. With all the weed they had lying around, even if the couple smoked 18 heavy joints a day per person, they had enough for 10 years. That ain't recreational, folks. I knew I had them when I heard the bailiff snort when I presented the numbers. Keeping this as vague as possible to not dox myself, but my security camera caught the plaintiff putting a human poop in my mailbox. When the other lawyer got a call on his cell phone while he was making his closing argument to the judge. He told the judge, "Just a second," and took the call. Not my case, but during my aunt's divorce. Custody case. Wasn't really one hearing per se, but over multiple hearings. My aunt wanted full custody of the kids. She initially had custody, but uncle was allowed to see the kids every other weekend under supervision. Uncle was abusive, nasty even to the kids. Even under supervision. Social services reported his behavior, and at hearings he was rude and arrogant to the judge. Wouldn't listen and even walked out on a few occasions. Even his barrister thought he was a piece of shit. He made it obvious he didn't give a shit about the kids, and he and his mother declared on a few occasions that the kids were a result of incest between their mother and her father. Yeah, he dug his own grave with that one. Judge ruled that normally father will get some custody at least, but he was making an exception and banning him from coming near the kids until they're 18. Aunt got full custody. He said that they weren't his kids at the custody hearing? What the duck? Seems like maybe he didn't want custody. It's a classic move of a narcissist that feels like they've losing, try to paint the opposition as some kind of monsters. And guarantee that in this case the only reason he was even asking for custody was to avoid paying child support. I can't really say I'm proud of this one. It's not a happy case. But it was a pretty sure winner. I represented a client once who had gone through a really rough marriage, divorce several years prior. Child drowned. A couple miscarriages. Wife developed postpartum on one, which amplified an existing mental illness. Incredibly sad story. At the time I came into the story, the ex-wife had been in jail for several years, stalking her ex-husband initially, but was still being held because she wasn't competent to stand trial. And I was representing the ex-husband, who just wanted authorization to take over sale of the house so they could finally finish severing ties. Prior to the trial, the wife's pro se briefs made it seem like she was under the impression they were going to relitigate the divorce, filled with allegations related to the marriage itself. Like I said upthread, she already had mental problems, and it was clear she'd picked up some sov-sit tendencies during her ongoing incarceration. When it actually came to trial and she was brought in, you could tell she was clearly not well. She was having a conversation with herself while my client was on the stand giving his explanation of the situation. We didn't really have any witnesses to speak of. This was hardly a major matter. So the ex-wife gave her side after that. And that's when the wheels fell off. She basically went on like she had in her briefs, rambling about the divorce itself, claiming my client had committed adultery and therefore she was entitled to 100% of all assets. Aforementioned sov-sit stuff, some general babbling, etc. The judge we had was a nice guy, for which I'm forever grateful. He was patient with her, kind, reminded her that the initial divorce wasn't the issue, but generally just let her continue to speak her piece for a bit. After a few minutes, he gently shut her down, had the bailiff and guards lead her away, and gave us the authorization. Like I said, it's not a happy, oh Lord, we're so going to win this case. Just a sad situation, but it was probably my surest winner other than default judgments. Not a lawyer, but one time I had to get a restraining order against my ex-girlfriend. She was stalking me after I broke up with her. In retaliation after I filed for the restraining order against her, she filed for one against me. Totally ridiculous since all I wanted was for her to leave me alone. So we had a hearing in court to sort this out. And this conversation takes place. Judge, Mr. Lingonberry, it says in her statement that you attacked her with an axe. Did you attack this woman with an axe? Me, no, Your Honor. Judge, I see. Well, since you've both filed restraining orders against each other, why don't we forego the restraining orders and you two can just leave each other alone? My ex. Immediately, yes, me, Your Honor. I would still like the restraining order. Please, I got the restraining order. She violated it so many times I might as well not have. But I got the restraining order. What happens when someone violates a restraining order? Theoretically they should go to jail. In practice, that never happened. She continued stalking me, but was sneaky about it for about 5 years after I got the restraining order. I suspect that if I was a female and she was a male it would have been taken more seriously.